Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, we'll be talking about how to download a user's tweet. Now, some of you guys might be thinking, isn't there an API available to download the tweets? And to that, I would say yes, there is an API available to download the tweets, but it has some limitations. Let's take a look at some of the world leaders. First, we'll take a look at Narendra Modi. He is the Prime Minister of India. And up until now, he has around 26,000 tweets altogether. Now, that's quite many tweets for a world leader. Let's take another world leader, Donald Trump. He is currently the president of the US. And up until now, he has around 51,000 tweets. You can see the number of tweets for a person when you're logged in. Currently, I'm logged out, so we can't see the number of tweets. But if you log in, you'll see that Narendra Modi has around 27,000 tweets and President Trump has around 51,000 tweets. Now let's get back to the API. So this is get method for status of a user's timeline. It can be used. What we need is either a screen name or a user ID. And when we do this, this method can only return up to 3,200 of users' most recent tweets. Now, if the user we're talking about is not so much active on Twitter, this just works fine because all we need is up until 3,200. But what happens if we're talking about leaders like Modi and Trump and Barack Obama and many other leaders who are very, very active on Twitter? In that case, it's the limit that is enforced by Twitter does not work good. In one of the research projects in my personal space I was working, I wanted to download tweets for a world leader that had tweeted in thousands, many thousands, more than what the Twitter limit allows us to download in one go. So what I did is I wrote some code to bypass the limit. We'll see how we can avoid this 3,200 limit to download the tweets. But I will strictly say that please don't bombard Twitter and please follow the terms and conditions for Twitter when you are using this solution. So for making the solution, what I did was I wrote some code. The code is available as an IPython notebook as well as a Python code. What we need is the following. So we see this snapshot of Narendra Modi and Donald Trump. What I used was a Twitter search page. So Twitter provides a search page where we can use certain keywords such as from whom we want this search to happen. So which Twitter ID, until what date, and since when. And then when you click on the latest, you'll see all the tweets for that person in that time period. What I did was I iterated one day at a time to get the tweets for this particular user going back to the day that the user joined Twitter. So we will see how to use this code. As I mentioned, please use at your own discretion. I use this code to pull data for two Twitter handles for research purposes. Please use Twitter API to download tweets whenever possible. As I mentioned, this can help to bypass the 3,200 limit that is put by the Twitter API. The code is provided as Jupyter Notebook and as Python file. We need the following modules, Python packages, requests, zip file, tweepy, selenium, and dateutil. Zip file and dateutil should already come pre-installed with any Python 3 distribution. So you need to install only the others, requests, selenium, and tweepy. Tweepy is basically the library that we are going to use to download the tweets via API. Now, in order to run this, please install the necessary dependencies. Create a folder maybe with the Twitter username so that if you are using this for more than one user, they can all be segregated. Copy all these files from this GitHub repository into that folder. Make changes to the config.py file and run the program. We'll see the files one by one. Now what happens when the program is run? The code first uses the API to fetch the most recent 3200 tweets and then uses Selenium to distribute any other tweets. So for example, for Donald Trump, if Donald Trump has 100 tweets and he joined Twitter in March 2009. What the code will do is download the first 200 tweets and then the rest 48,000 tweets will be divided across n number of tasks that can function in parallel to download the tweets. Let's take a look at what data points are provided by this code. The tweet text, that is denoted by text in the CSV file. The number of replies to a tweet denoted by replies count. Number of retweets to a tweet denoted by retweet count. Number of times a tweet has been favorited denoted by favorite count. URL of the tweet denoted by tweet URL. Creation date time of the tweet denoted by created date time. If a video was attached to a tweet, for example, let's see here. So here is a video that is being attached to the tweet. And we can see that up until now, it has 541,000 views approximately. So the video URL will have the URL of the video if there is. And if there is a video, the video views will have the number of views for that. The Twitter username will be denoted by screen name and the language of the tweet is denoted by language. Let's take a look at the trade-offs. So Chrome and Firefox both can be used to download the Selenium part of the tweets. Keep in mind that adding more threads to make the process faster, but it can also give rise to issues such as getting throttled by Twitter. For example, if you are using hundreds of threads, Twitter server might block you or might throttle your requests. So keep that in mind. I have not taken that into account. However, that can be also taken into account while building the code. Keep it also in mind that there will also be a RAM restriction. So the more number of browsers that you use, it will start eating into your RAM and you might not do any other processes. Also keep in mind that with so many windows open, it might be possible that you will not be able to work. Now let's take a look at some of the variables that are used in this program. The first is date and past. This basically denotes up until what date the tweet should be downloaded. The default value is 1st of January 2020. So for example, if you just keep this, for any user, it will download tweets up until this date, or if the creation date of the Twitter handle is after this date, that day will be taken into account. So for example, the Twitter handle was created on March 1st, 2020. Even if you give us for January 1st, 2020, the code will understand that the handle was created after this date and will download tweets only up until 1st March 2020. Days and past. This basically works in conjunction with date and past. So if we give days and past as 5, it will download the last 5 days of tweets. If the days in past is 200, it will then basically work with date in past and days in past. Whichever is earlier, that is used. So for example, if 100 days ago is less than this, then this date in past will be used. Another variable is number of tweets to download. So it is the number of tweets that should be downloaded for the user. Output file name suffix. So if any name that is needed for the files that are being downloaded from Twitter, default is none. Anything can be added. Timesleep and timesleep browser close are two important variables. So timesleep is basically every time a new URL is reloaded in Selenium, the program sleeps for a few seconds. Now this is important to avoid any distraction from the server and thus throttling any connection request. Ideally, this time should be kept in mind, for example, the total number of tweets of the user and the time that should spend to download the Twitter. You can't keep this time sleep 1 hour if the user has hundreds and thousands of tweets. Similarly, the time sleep browser close, what happens is every few URLs, the browser is closed and reopened. This is again done to avoid any blockage from Twitter. Let's take a look at Twitter specific variables. So Twitter username is the username of the person without quotes. Please remember, do not add any quotes. Do not make it a Python string. Just paste as it is. So for example, for this user, it will be Narendra Modi, no quotes. For this user, it will be real Donald Trump, no quotes again. Consumer key and consumer secret key, access token secret can all be found using Twitter developer account. Please make a developer token and make an app. If you don't have one, it's really easy and free. There are multiple documentations on the website. I even have one on my blog. If you like to know how to make these keys. Let's take a look at some variables specific to Chrome. So the first variable is Chrome Gecko driver location. So when we are running this Selenium code, it basically will open a Chrome browser. Now that Chrome browser needs something called a Chrome driver, which can be downloaded from here. If you've already downloaded that from this link, it will please specify the location. Again, please make sure that if you're using Ubuntu or if you're using Linux, choose the corresponding path. Default is none. Use Chrome is basically a Boolean variable. Again, it basically specifies whether to use Chrome to download the tweets via Selenium. The default value is 0. Non-threads Chrome is basically how many Chrome browsers to use to download the tweets. Let's say if there are hundreds and thousands of tweets, obviously we would like to use more number of threads so that the time to download the tweets will be reduced. Keep in mind that if use Chrome is 1, basically that means that use Chrome to download tweets, and num threads Chrome is 0, then the code basically defaults the num thread Chrome to 1. Now Linux 64, Windows, and Mac OS, these are some of the variables that you might need to edit to download the Chrome driver from. Please make sure that this version that you specify matches the version of the Chrome browser on your system. If that does not happen, the code will run into an error. So that error will be specified. So please make sure that you download the corresponding links from here, from this link. There are multiple links to here. You can use whichever version your Chrome browser is. If we use Chrome browser, use Chrome as 1, that basically means that you please use Chrome, and Chrome Gecko driver location is none. So what this program will do is will download the corresponding Chrome driver from this link depending on your system. So for example, let's say if you have a Mac, this will basically download the Mac version of the Chrome driver from this link, unzip it, and do the corresponding. Same will be done for other system as well. The program can also use Firefox. So with Firefox, same thing. We have the Firefox Gecko driver location, and there are different versions of Mozilla Gecko driver as well. So you can download that accordingly. So these are the latest ones that are available. All we need to do is download and unzip. Use Firefox is again a Boolean variable, and it specifies whether to use Firefox to download tweets via Selenium or not. Now again, if use Firefox is turned on or it's true, and Firefox Gecko driver location is none, it will download the Gecko driver from these links that we have specified below. Number of threads, Firefox, again, if use Firefox is true and num threads Firefox is 0, num threads Firefox defaults to 1. These are the links corresponding to the system. So for example, Mac OS, Linux 32-bit, Linux 64-bit system, Windows 32-bit system, Windows 64-bit system. I have tested this code on 2 Twitter handles, as I mentioned. If there are any bugs or any questions about this code, please feel free to uh, put out issues or any questions or comments. Now let's take a look at the code, how the code basically functions. There are certain aspects. So first, let's take a look at config.py. Now this is the configuration file, as I mentioned, and all the variables that we just discussed are here. Again, I want to specify, please do not add quotes to this. If you add quotes, it will run into an error. So avoid any quotes. I have entered XXXX, replace that with the Twitter username, consumer key, consumer secret, access token secret, and update these links if you think that your system is different than what I had. It might be possible that you have a different system altogether. And when I say system, I mean the Firefox or Chrome system. Now we also have helpers.py. What this helpers.py does, it basically takes the configuration and checks whether you are using a Linux, Mac OS, Windows, and then whether you would like to use Chrome or Firefox or maybe both of them. If you would like to use both of them, it will download the corresponding version of the Gecko driver if that's not already specified, and do the necessary changes. I need to remove some of these print statements that I used for debugging. However, that should not be any problem because that just runs once. Now let's take a look at the notebook. I think that will be an easier way to scroll through and look at the code rather than the py file. So I'll use that. As I mentioned, what this does is download the user's tweet, avoiding the 3200 limit imposed by Twitter API. It returns an Excel CSV with user tweet with corresponding values. Now here are some of the imports, very, very simple. I think apart from tweepy, selenium, pandas, and request, we don't need anything else. I think I need to update pandas in the requirements.txt file, which I'll do after this video. What this piece of code does is it finds which platform is being used, and then correspondingly use the platform. This is basically to find the bit size of the system. Now this basically loads the variables from config, and then this piece of code just passes all of them from the config file. Keep in mind that, as I mentioned, please do not use quotes for the Twitter related variables. So as I mentioned, what we do for the Selenium part is we use a search URL for Twitter and scroll for every day and download all the tweets. This piece of code basically authenticates to Twitter using the secret key that is being provided. And what we have also done is wait on rate limit is equal to true and wait on rate limit notify is equal to true. So Twitter has also certain rate limits that is being placed. Ideally, that should not be a problem if you're just downloading 3,200 tweets or less. But let's say if you are running this code for multiple handles, then you must be hitting the rate limit that is being imposed by Twitter. In that case, it's wise to wait on that rate limit. Otherwise, the requests get delayed much more and more if we start hitting the Twitter API. Good for us that tweepy does that by default. The next piece of code basically checks the credentials whether uh, they have been done successfully. Otherwise, will throw an error. If it throws an error, please make sure that the consumer key, consumer secret, access token secret are correct, and you have provided them in the config file, and they do not have any quotes in them. The next piece of code, what we do is we find the user created date. So uh, when did the Twitter user create the Twitter handle? It also takes into account the current uh, today's date, and then what it does, it finds in certain logic since when or until when it should download the data. So as I mentioned before, it there are 3 days to take into account. The first is the user created date. The second date is the date in past that was provided, and the third day is days in past. So depending on which of them makes sense, the code decides to go until that day. So for example, let's say, as I mentioned, if the date provided is earlier than the user created date, the program can only download the data until user created date because there's no data that exists before that. The next piece of code basically downloads the most recent 3200 tweets via the Twitter API. Please keep in mind this tweet mode is equal to extended. Otherwise, what will happen is certain tweets, if more than the previous limit of Twitter, the tweets will come as trimmed with 3 dots. With this keyword, the whole of the tweet will be coming. Uh, you can learn more on the tweepy.cursor from the tweepy documentation page. It's pretty easy to understand. The next bit of code, what it does, now we have the Twitter data. It basically converts that to a CSV file. So we get the screen name, we get the text of the tweet, we get the creation date, we get the retweet count, favorite count. Keep in mind that there is no replies uh, count that comes with the uh, API. For that, we will be using the Selenium APIs to download the replies count. The tweet URL comes with the tweet ID. Then we have the language, which language the tweet was done. Then the video URL, if there was a video attached to tweet, and then the video views, if there was a video to that. And then we convert that to a data frame, and then we download the data frame. The next bit of code, what it does, it finds the last tweet state from the API response. So for example, the 3200 tweets, among them, the last tweet was done 5 days ago. So it finds that date time stamp, and from that point of time until the date time specified onto which the data needs to be downloaded, the tweets will be downloaded. We then find how many threads were specified for Firefox and Chrome, and then, as I mentioned, if Chrome has been specified and threads Chrome is equal to 0, it will default to 1, and same with Firefox. What then we do is we put out a list for range of days starting from the start day to the end day, and between these dates the tweets will be downloaded. Then we create the number of threads is equal to the number of threads for Chrome plus number of threads for Firefox. Then we distribute the data for which the tweet should be downloaded, and that is all days and into number of threads. And then the browser type is basically Chrome into Chrome, number of thread types Chrome, and Firefox into the number of times Firefox. This piece of code basically is the main piece of code that downloads our data using Selenium. This takes days thread, so the range of days for which this thread has to function. So for example, uh, after doing all of the above, we found that we need to download the code from today up until 100th day in the past. And let's say we use number of threads is equal to 4, combining number of threads of Chrome and Firefox. What this will do is it will distribute those 100 days into 4 threads. So each will be now working on 25 days. So we are cutting short that time uh, by 4. The browser is basically the browser type. The driver path is the path of the driver that is to be used. The time sleep, as I mentioned, the time that the code sleeps between the URL loads. Time sleep browser close is the sleep time between browser exit and start, and the thread is the thread number in this. There's no return from this. It basically outputs the CSV containing the data acquired by this thread and outputs that to a CSV. So if browser is Chrome, then load the Chrome browser, otherwise load the Firefox browser, initialize a data frame, and then initialize another data frame that basically has screen name, URL, start date, and end date. And then for days, in the days thread, there will be an until parameter and since parameter, which will be then used to calculate a new Twitter URL for each day. So as I mentioned, starting from today up until whatever day that the data needs to be downloaded, there will be a new URL that will be done. And then every 5 days, the browser closes and then reopens. This is again to avoid any blockage in this. The next piece of code might change from time to time. So this is specific to the time of recording of this video, which is in early May 2020. What this does is it finds the divs that are related to the tweet, and then for that, it basically downloads uh, the text of the tweet, the replies count, the retweet, the favorite count, the tweet URL, the creation date, the viewed URL, and the video views. And then if there are multiple tweets on that page, there will be an infinitely scrollable uh, page. But in this case, since we're looking at just one day, there won't be thousands of tweets, maybe tens, 20, maybe 30 or so. It should not be a lot of tweets per day. What I've also done is kind of if generate a random number, and if that random number is 9, I just print that the thread is alive, so that if we are running a really long task, we kind of know that the thread is active. So the random number generation happens all the time, but when it is 9, then it basically prints and we know that the thread is alive. And as I mentioned, we output this data. The next bit of code is basically running this thing. So the multiprocessing library runs this in the processes. So the multiple processes are started using the function name above, and then we pass certain variables to this. And then we start the threads, and then we join the threads. The next piece of code is basically to merge all the Selenium files. So all the Selenium files will start with a Twitter username and end with browser.csv. So we find them, we concatenate them on top of each other, and then we output them in this format. Then we again re-authenticate the Twitter API. Again, this is to keep in mind that if the number of tweets downloaded is huge, then the Twitter API might have been might need re-authentication. In this part, basically, joins all the data together. So basically, if the data that is downloaded is in the first 3200, then all we need from the data from Selenium is the reply count uh, and everything. However, in the other case, we need much more than that. So uh, we we need the tweet text, which is much more formatted here. I think I need some more formatting in the Selenium code. However, I use the Twitter API to download the the tweet text and convert that to a data frame, and then at the end convert that to a browser. I convert that to a CSV file. So this is the IPython notebook. Again, please feel free to make any changes if you think if you like to do that. The same is provided as a Python file. While looking at this code, I found that I made some more changes that I need to do. I'll update that after this video. As I mentioned, please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and please feel free to put out any comments or questions if you have. With that, thank you.